Hello everyone. After a long gap, we are meeting again for discussing, continuing our series of social issues for mains. Social issues is, as we have talked earlier, it is a very important topic when it comes to mains because of questions being asked every year. Okay, up to this time we have in earlier classes discussed about the salient features of Indian society, diversity in India, role of women and women organization, effects of globalization of Indian society, population and associated issues was discussed in the last very lecture. So today we would be actually talking two important but very short topics, and hence we would be taking two topics together, and it is poverty and developmental issues. So poverty has been something that has been very important, what we call a topic that has always been in the political discussion. So if you remember that there was a very famous call of Garibi Hatao by Indira Gandhi government, which actually led to various political scientists actually what we call discussing about how Indian government takes what we call takes steps to reduce poverty. On one hand, there has been significant reduction in terms of poverty. For example, when we talk about from uh, at the time of independence, there nearly half of the population was living under poverty, or even more than that. However, today, if we talk, then around if we see at the latest data, according to what we call Tendulkar line, I believe, then it is 22%, something around that. So poverty definition again, it changes from time. There are multiple dimensions through which poverty is being measured. On one hand, we have the dimension that we have what we call the what we call we have the NSSO data for what we call determining poverty. On the other hand, there are other also organizations such as what we call United Nations and Oxford Poverty Index. They comes up with multi-dimensional poverty index, and what we call there is World Bank also, which comes with certain what we call certain what we call level, certain income level as a expenditure level as a poverty index, as well as their economics intelligence unit comes up with what we call Big Mac index, which actually tells us the amount of what we call poverty that is there when it comes to what we call a certain area. Poverty, let's start with the class today. If after this brief introduction, first of all, I would like to talk about what is poverty. Okay, so poverty, if we talk about what is poverty, what we have to understand that there are two ways in which poverty is usually understood. The first one is the first way through which it is in the first way through which it is understood is the absolute poverty, and the second one, it is the relative poverty. Okay, the first one, if we talk about the first one, it is the absolute poverty. So basically, absolute, as the term says, is the way of what we call defining, in which certain what a class of people, certain collection of people just lack certain basic requirements, as a result of which they are unable to live a life of fulfillment. For example, some basic needs would include food, food. Then you could actually what we call include clothing. Then we can have housing. What we call, so all these things are actually what we call it actually comes under what we call absolute poverty. So you actually just define a way, a single parameter through which you would be measuring the degree of deprivation that is present in the society, and that would be understood as absolute poverty. When we talk about the second type of poverty definition, and it is relative poverty. Basically, relative poverty would include what we call a sense of relativity. So you would be comparing one class of people to the other class, and look at we'll try to understand how what we call how well off one class is with respect to another. So basically, that would include relative poverty. One of the major ways through which we actually what we call discuss relative poverty is through which what income level of a of a certain class of people. So through that we could actually come to an understanding that okay, what kind of relative poverty actually exists. When it comes to government planning and everything, as I told, most of the question, you must be able to understand why we are studying and how we are going to utilize it in our administration. So that will help you not only writing a good mains answer, it will also help you in writing a wonderful presenting a wonderful interview answer as well. So basically, if you try to understand why these two way of definition exist, we can come to some kind of some sort of assumption. We can make some assumption that, for example, if we talk about the absolute poverty, okay, if we have some way of what we call coming up with a what we call poverty line, so we could easily measure absolute poverty then could be used in developmental planning, which is what we call one of the major goal of administration. It is also one of the important goals enshrined in our constitution as well. If we go through the directive principle of state policy, which form the fundamental values, fundamental yardstick through which what we call government policy are being measured against. So I believe that would also suggest that poverty alleviation is one of the major goal of constitution as well. So when we talk about relative poverty comes into play when there is what we call relative poverty could be utilized during developmental planning as well. For example, as a society develops, we would be the dimension through which we are measuring poverty could be diversified. Initially, when what we call at the time of before independence, our what we call Dadabhai Naroji was one of the pioneer when it came to when it came to measuring poverty. So according to him, he came up with this idea of jail mm, people living in jail. Basically, he considered them as a basic level of basic needs that is required for a person to survive, and based on that he was able to come up with the amount that is required for a person to ensure that he is or she is not living under poverty. Here I would like to give a suggestion to the viewers that please go through the class 11 book on economic development. It is very important book when it comes to poverty. And here I would like to request a question to the viewers that please let me know, what do you mean by the following statement? Poverty is a state of mind. Please let me know, what do you mean by this statement? Poverty is a state of mind. So let's move about poverty in India. So poverty in India has been something that was a major concern, as we talked about, since planning, what we call planning itself, the time of independence itself. So statistics have changed. When we talk about poverty in India at the time of independence, it was more than 50%. Today it is around 22%. However, when we talk about the World Bank Index, the World Bank Index on poverty says that India faces around 40% of people under poverty, and so is the case of multi-dimension poverty index as well. It also suggests that more than 40% of people in India are under poverty line. So I would suggest to my friends, my dear my viewers, that please go through the dynamics, the pillars on the basis of which this index are created, and let me know your viewpoint on their measurement. So poverty has been something that has been, as I said, it has been well discussed topic. So various committee has been formed to come up with a good idea of what is poverty line, or what poverty line is good. So it ranges from YK Alak committee to Lakdawala committee to Tendulkar committee and so on. Currently, actually, what planning commission, which has been replaced by the Niti Aayog, basically the Niti Aayog has said that we would be more focusing not on measuring of poverty, rather than the difference that we are able to make when it comes to poverty alleviation program. So when it comes to poverty, let's look at some of the statistics again, which are individual statistics and could be very well used when you are writing some answer. I would also request you to go through the deprivation parameter system, which is a very important when study done by the NSSO. I would request you to go through the deprivation parameter system, which the study which was done in what we call national socio-economic caste census. The SCCC 2011 was done on various parameter of deprivation. I would request you, the viewers, to go through it and try to learn what are the deprivation parameter that the government considered in the socio-economic caste census 2011. So let's move to the statistic part, and I would, as I said, please go through the socio-economic caste census for sure. Some of the statistics that I would like to quote is that the 50% of Indians don't have proper shelter. So here I would like to elaborate on the question that I've asked you earlier, and that is poverty is a state of mind. So how come, shelter, which is a which we talked about in what absolute poverty is a basic necessity, how come it changes the way people have access to desirable goals in the society? Okay, so suppose someone doesn't have a shelter, basically he and she would be exposed to natural calamities as well as other form of uncertainty, which is not present when you have a proper shelter. Proper shelter would introduce you do not feel sick more often. You do have a place where you could sleep, take a good sleep. Or you could engage yourself in recreation. You could have a proper social life. You could provide your son education, daughter education. Everything actually, somehow is related to housing. And again, if you think that at the end of the day I still have to sleep at some pavement, then you could actually just imagine how much stress that person would be going through. So that actually shows that there are poverty ultimately leads to multiple what we call impact on a person, and that is mostly in the form of physical, psychological, and mental as well. So your development of the person living without a home would also be less. So that actually shows that how housing or basic necessity actually impact and ensure that person is either in poverty or not. Other thing that I would like to talk about is that most of the poor people in India lives in the rural area. So basically it says that when India is represented by the rural India, the villages, and if we talk about the statistics, more what we call when it comes to people living below poverty line are more in the rural areas. So here is a question to the viewers, that let me know in the comment section that how does being in rural area and what kind of relation actually occurs from being in rural areas and poverty. I'd like to give a hint here that agriculture is the main occupation of rural India, and henceforth there must be some relation when it comes to living in rural areas and poverty line. One of the things that I would like to talk about when it comes to rural and urban poverty, and it is something that is called as poverty, what we call the cycle of poverty. What actually happens is that various studies have suggested, and I would request you that you go through the graphs that has been given in the NCERT class 11 that I have just suggested. You would actually see that there has been rapid increase in the there has been some kind of trade-off when it comes to urban and rural poverty. Poverty seems to have transferred from rural areas to urban areas, and as and when they live in the poverty cycle in the urban areas, and ultimately they come back to rural areas again with the same amount of poverty. So that actually shows that rather than poverty being eliminated, somehow the statistics is unable to capture the poverty being transferred from rural to urban areas and vice versa. So it's a very wonderful, actually, what we call a wonderful conclusion that we could draw, a wonderful correlation that we could draw after a good analysis of the data that we have when it comes to poverty in India. So in the comment section again, I would like to know what actually causes the poverty to be transferred from rural areas to the urban areas and still remain there in the poor condition as well. It is said, again I would like to add to this, add some hints to the question itself, that there is a vicious cycle of poverty. Suppose a person is poor. So we would be talking about the causes of poverty in the next slide, but let me tell you some a brief about this poverty being transferred from rural to urban areas. There are certain conditions which is required for a person to get out from the vicious cycle of poverty. For example, there needs to be certain amount of income that has to be injected into the family so that he or she or the entire family comes out of poverty, or there should be certain, what we call education, health facility, the social security angle, social security net that needs to be ensured so that people do not fall in poverty. One must note here that it is not necessary that a person might be poor throughout the year. There might be, what we call phases during the entire year where where a person might have to live as if he or she is in under below poverty line because of the seasonal nature of the economy, the seasonal nature of occupation that he or she is involved in, or the family is involved in. So that actually shows that people might be cycling from poverty to non-poverty also. So when it comes to such kind of scenario, one must know that there should be a social security net always. If you talk about the social security net, ILO report, the International Labour Organization report, has actually showed the dismal performance of government all over the world in providing social security net. Social security net is very much important to ensure that a person doesn't fall under poverty line. I would like to quote a figure here. It is said that every year around 5 lakh people in India falls below poverty line because of the exorbitant rate of hospital bills that they have to pay. Again, one more figure which I would like to quote is that 67% of hospital expenditure is out of pocket expenditure in India. That actually shows that a huge amount of money would be required when a person get hospitalized. There is no social security net which is quite working functional in a very good manner, which is available for the citizen to avail. Here I would again like to note that Ayushman Bharat is one of the wonderful program that the government have started. However, it would take some time for the people, especially the poorer section, to come under the social security net of Ayushman Bharat. Let's move to the causes of poverty that we would be talking about when it comes to poverty, especially in India. So one of the first region that I would like to talk about is climatic region. Climatic region plays a very important role. Here I would like to talk about the report that was generated by, there was a report which actually came, you could go through the Hindu, that actually shows that when it comes to productivity, the central region of India, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, would actually see the most dramatic decrease in productivity because of the climate change, because of the heat intensity being increasing. And if you talk, recently I was just going through a report, one of my friend who shared 11, 11 out of 14 cities are today, touching the highest or the hottest city in terms of temperature all over the world. So that actually shows that the heat, with time, the summers is getting more hotter, the productivity is bound to decrease, and not only that, a person would not be able to find job. He or she might end up what we call dead. So that actually just might push the entire family beyond poverty line, below poverty line. Climate again, since we know that around 50% of the population in India still today is involved in agriculture, and agriculture in India is quite dependent upon the monsoon, and that is because of the less reach of the irrigation system, as well as the efficiency of use of irrigation system is also low. So here again I would like to talk about a paradox, that Maharashtra, which is known to have the highest irrigation potential, has what we call regions of highest farmer suicide as well. Farmer suicide could always be correlated to poverty, and that actually shows that creating irrigation potential is very much different, is not same as utilizing the created potential. So it is very much important that just like we have social security net when it comes to health challenges, we need irrigation, or what we call public infrastructure when it comes to agriculture, so as to ensure that climate doesn't become a reason for pushing people beyond poverty line. Let's talk about the other factor, and it is the demographic factor. When it comes to demography, I would like to talk about population of India. One must understand that given the large population that India has to support, the resources that is available with India is bound to decrease. I would like to mention that around uh, we only have 2.4% of land when it comes to the entire world, the land resources. However, the amount of population that we support, including the livestock and so on, is around 19%. So that actually showcase the pressure that land resources in India faces due to the high population existing in India. So that actually applies to other resources as well. So again, when it comes to large number of population, even the government efforts might get to reduced down. When it comes to poverty elevation, might get very reduced down, or might become very small as it reaches to the common people, and it might not henceforth prove worthy to push people out of poverty. So there is a famous what we call a statistics which says that out of the 10 rupees spent in India, only 1 rupees reaches to the actual beneficiary. That actually shows that due to the population, with population high, what we call population density being one of the region, that is also being one of the fact, it becomes a reason for the low amount or least amount of money reaching to actual beneficiary. When it comes to demography, not only population, the rapid growth of population is also one of the important reason which led to poverty. Here I would like to refer to the last slide, last lecture on population, in which I talked about the demographic transition model of population. So basically, in the demographic transition model, if you could remember, we had this kind of curve. The curve actually, the curve had a growth phase and then a slow phase of birth rate. In this region, when the policy, this time is what we call the 1970s, the population expanded to such a great extent. However, the social services or the resources didn't expanded so well. So the high growth of population was not met well with the resources growth, as a result of which we had this problem of poverty. Apart from that, the average size of family is also something that needs to be taken care of. It is said that as the size of what as the size average size of as the size of family increases, the chances that what we call the family would be pushed to the vicious cycle of poverty. The vicious cycle of poverty is high. So let me talk about how this actually would happen. What happens in a very big uh, family size is that people, when we have this big family size, the resources again at the scale of family becomes less, so making available education, good health to the children become an issue. At the same time, it is said and it is considered that more number of family members means more earning member of the family. So in that perspective, a family who is poor might go for more number of children. However, since the children won't be educated well, won't be given proper health facilities, they might not become as productive as possible, so that to pull the family out of poverty. So as a result of which, the very vicious cycle of poverty is created, which is perpetuated generation after generation. So here it actually shows how average size of family impact the poverty cycle. Here I would like to talk about size of family in terms of female household family as well. A study was done by Dr. Amrit Sen that female headed household have more chances of being pushed into poverty, and this is popularly known as feminization of poverty as well. So I have a request to the I have a request to the viewers that please let me know what is the average size of family in India, and how does it varies from region to region? Here I would like to ask the reviewers to take a notice on how poverty in different regions as well as the average size of family has a direct correlation or not. Let's move to the other factors, and it is economic cause of poverty. Economic causes of poverty is can be considered one of the prominent region. However, it cannot be considered as the sole reason for poverty. Economic reason of poverty could include non-holding of property, land, for example. Given the caste system in India, which is again a social factor, which I will be talking later, you could actually understand how caste system affected the land holding, and how people who are not having land tend to be more poor rather than people who are actually having land. So that actually shows that the economic factor of not having productivity, of not having productive asset, is also a reason for poverty. Apart from that, I would like to talk about how in a society, if the economy, at the national level, if the national economy is not able to generate good number of jobs, it would also lead to poverty as well. The national economy the economy at the national level also needs to be productive as well. It should be becoming bigger so that a bigger pie is available, and henceforth the government as well as the people have a bigger share when it comes to returns of such economic growth. So when it comes to economic issues, especially when it comes to rural areas, as I told you, I have requested earlier that please what we call write down the reason of poverty being more concentrated in rural areas. So here I would like to talk about some of the economic reasons of the very same of poverty being more concentrated in rural areas. The first is the low agricultural productivity. As I have earlier said, that agriculture tends to be more important when it comes to rural areas, and the productivity in agriculture is declining day by day, decade by decade. If we talk about the productivity of agriculture, the curve could be seen as a descending curve. So that actually shows the productivity of agriculture has declined with time. So that becomes a very important reason for poverty in rural areas, because rural areas primarily are involved in agriculture. The reason why which productivity in agriculture have declined, I request the viewers to come up with the reason and post it in the comment section so that I am able to review it. One of the reason, again I would like to give a hint, that productivity has decreased with time because of the improper implementation or the failure of implementation of land reforms. Other regions, I would request the viewers to add in the comment section. As I mentioned earlier also, uneconomic distribution of land and other assets is also one of the reason. It is more pronounced in rural areas because rural areas are most the caste based distinction is more pronounced, and people are actually, when it comes to urban areas, one could actually see more mobility in occupation, more what we call equal form of land distribution and everything. However, that is not the case when it comes to rural areas. Apart from that, one of the other thing that we could actually talk about is the decline of village industry. The village industry, when it comes to India, has declined since independence with the coming up of major MNC as well. Government has formed KVIC, which is aimed to Khadi and Village Industrial Commission. It is also one of the DPSP, and again it is a request to the viewers that please write down which DPSP I am talking about when I refer to Khadi and Village Industry Commission. So basically, government has tried to promote the village industry. However, given the competition and lack of capital and other resources, they have not been able to fulfill the dream of poverty alleviation in rural areas. Apart from that, the other region that we could talk about when it comes to economic regions, it is the immobility of labor. Many times there actually exists a scenario in which, although a family might be poor for him or her, for the member of the family to move from one place to another looking for job might not be possible. It could also stem in not having proper education. Apart from that, not having capital to sustain in such region where the labor cost is high is also one of the reason which leads to immobility of labor, and henceforth they remain in the vicious cycle of poverty. Other thing that is cause of economic reason of poverty is, again as I said, is the unemployment. Unemployment is one of the major reason of poverty, and when the economy is not able to generate good number of jobs, especially if here again I would like to talk about the economy survey definition of good job, which actually says that a stable job, a job which has social security and is good in terms of remuneration, is also paying you good. So that is the definition of a good job, and it is very much important that we make a distinction between job and good job. A good job is very much essential that the economy produces so that the people come out of poverty and remain so without entering into the vicious cycle again. Let's talk to the next let's move to the next section, and it is social causes of poverty. When it comes to social causes of poverty, we must understand that what are the social security net. Actually, I was talking about just few minutes ago, and that actually would help you to understand what could be the possible social causes of poverty. As I talked about in the social security net, one of the reason why people are pushed in poverty again is the health expenditure. So presence of what we call a good health, absence of a good healthcare system is one of the social causes of poverty, especially if we talk about the skewed, what we call skewed way in which the healthcare system in India is distributed. For example, in rural areas, it is less number of people actually, what we call less healthcare facilities is present. On the other hand, urban areas has better healthcare facilities. So that actually shows, again as I said, the region which I asked you to mention why poverty is high in rural areas. That is yet again a region in which so lack of healthcare facilities is one of the region of high pronounced uh, what we call poverty in rural areas. Apart from that, education is what we call lack of education also becomes one of the important social causes of poverty. I would like to mention that the quote of Nelson Mandela here. Nelson Mandela, who was the president of South Africa, has famously quoted that education is the most powerful weapon in the world when it comes to its effectiveness in poverty alleviation. We could also understand this very fact from government emphasis on education, as well as the very constitution asking the government, directing the government to ensure that education is provided to people, especially to the people who are from socially and educationally backward classes. So that actually shows that education is the agent of social change. It is very much important that a person experience mobility throughout its generation. If a boy, if a girl, if he or she is able to get higher education more than what earlier generation have received, the chances that she or he would be employed in a occupation which is more stable, is well paying, and have a good social security net increases. So that actually shows that education is very much important, and lack of education could cause a person to fall into the vicious cycle of poverty. Apart from that, caste system is again very important when it comes to the social causes of poverty. As I've said, the caste system used to be the way through which the privileges, the things, the material as well as immaterial goals of the society were distributed. The immaterial goals, which included dignity and respect, and the material goals include assets which were distributed according to the caste system. And it is said that the poverty is as high as more than 50% when it comes to scheduled caste and scheduled tribes in India. That actually shows that so caste system has been one of the prominent region of poverty in India, the social causes of poverty in India. The joint family system is yet again considered one of the causes of poverty in India. Actually, joint family system does provide you with social security at the time of need. However, such kind of social security is present only when you have some asset, and as I said, the asset holding has difference when it comes to people belonging to upper caste and people belonging to lower caste. So having a joint family when it comes to lower caste become a burden, and as a result of which the family size again increases. And I've already told you that one of the demographic cause of poverty is large average size of family. The resources get much distributed, it become minute when it comes to members of the family, and henceforth joint family system, in spite of being a good social security, can push a family into vicious cycles of poverty as well. Apart from that, there are other social causes which we could mention. One important thing is the social custom. Here I would like to talk about the suicide, the farmer suicide, which actually happens in some parts of India. When we talk about the farmer society, of course one of the prominent reason is poverty, but let me tell you that government has been very much what we call adamant when it comes to providing loans for crop and everything. However, one of the thing that led to poverty, when it even in people in even in farmers family who have been availing loan, is the custom. The ritual and custom forces a farmer to go for suicide in scenario in which he or she is not able to provide her daughter a good marriage, his son or daughter a good level of education and healthcare facilities. So when a person, you could actually understand this from the very statement that the evolution of human being has been result of survival of the fittest. A person of genuine interest, a person intention to be alive is the greatest force on earth. When a person is coming to end his life, her life, that actually shows that such great force in the earth has been defeated. It is the logical end of all the thought process that actually could be anticipated in terms of solving one present issue. When a person is bogged from loan from outside, and the burden of having unwed daughter, unwed son, or good lack of education, inability to provide education, health to the family member, it actually blows and breaks the person from within, and henceforth lead to suicide. Again, one of the way through which we could identify the level of poverty that is existing in such an area. So that actually shows that social one of the social causes of poverty is social custom as well. So here I would like to talk about one of the social thinker, and he is Dipankar Gupta. According to Dipankar Gupta, it is not necessary that what is he was trying to make a distinction between tradition and modernity. According to him, modernity is not extravagance. We should not be spending so much so on social custom and consider it as modernity. There has been proposal of bills by legislative assembly as well as parliament to introduce a limit on the expenditure that actually person has to incur at the time of social customs such as marriage. So that actually shows how grave this concern and how big this concern is when it comes to social custom pushing a person or a family to poverty. Other thing that actually other what we call social causes that I could talk about, it is the increasing indebtedness. When we talk about increasing indebtedness, what actually happens is that the poverty cycle become more pronounced. Person debt is usually passed over through generation after generation. When a person actually takes too much of debt, he or she is unable to repay it back, it tends to pass on to the next generation. Here a problem of bonded labor actually comes up, in which generation after generation a person is bonded to certain work in certain family. The demand, the bargaining power actually decreases, and henceforth the chances that he or she would be coming outside the vicious cycle of poverty becomes bleak. So with that, I would like to end the causes of poverty. As I said, there could be as I have divided into four major parts, and these are climatic factors, demographic factor, economic and social factor. These are four main regions of poverty. Let's now talk about the question. The poverty chapter is now, what we call topic of poverty is now over. As I have said that I always emphasis on better answer writing. Let's talk about this. Let's discuss one of the question, and then we would be moving to what we call the next section, and that is developmental issues. When it comes to developmental issues, we could actually be talking about various developmental issues that India is currently facing. Now let's talk about this question, and as I said, one must I would request the viewers that please write this what we call please write this mm, answer. Please write the answer in detail in the comment section. I would be reviewing it on my own. Basically, the question says that what is empowerment line? Describe the capability approach or poverty alleviation. Here again, I have used certain graphs, and I would suggest that for searching for graphs, whenever you encounter a topic, just go to the Google, type the topic name, and go to the image section. Any part that you feel is what we call any simple graphs which you could feel that it explain the concept very well, it could be utilized when it comes to the very topic that we are discussing about. So the definition of empowerment line is that it is the amount of estimated minimum level of income that is needed to secure minimum necessity, the basic necessities of life. So here I would like to talk about give reference to the graph that we are that I have used. See, it talk about the official, it shows that the official poverty line and the empowerment line. So poverty line is something that is below which a person would be actually poor. Any person who is living below this would be actually poor. However, empowerment line goes a bit ahead. So this amount of this very small fraction, or this gap, is what is the amount of what we call amount of payout, amount of income that has to be provided to every family. And here the empowerment gap actually showcase the per capita the what we call the amount that has to be provided to each family multiplied by the number of family through which we have come with the empowerment gap. So that actually shows that how much amount would be required for the entire population to bring them out of the poverty. So that actually shows that empowerment line goes a bit above poverty line, and poverty line just tries to measure the amount of basic necessities that is required. Empowerment line would go further ahead in terms of the minimum income that has to be provided, so that a person family rises about the what we call poverty line and stays there for long. So from this graph, as it is showed, it actually shows the empowerment line in India. One must note that this very concept was provided by the McKinsey and Co. The idea of empowerment line. Apart from that, as we are talking about empowerment line, I have to talk about the capability approach of poverty alleviation as well. When we talk poverty alleviation approaches varies from society to society and nation to nation, and the capability approach of poverty alleviation was provided by our own very economist Dr. Amartya Sen, who got Nobel Prize in economics. So capability approach basically talks about providing resources to the individual so that he or she is able to develop capabilities and make choice, the increasing the choice. So basically it works from two different end. If there is a person, a person is here, okay, so basically what the government, from the government end, he or she should be provided with more resources, health, education, better what we call better internet connectivity, better housing, all these resources, better land resources has to be provided, and then the choices should be improved. When the resources could be utilized only when the choices exist, a person should be given the choice to take education or take a skilling activity of his own or her own choice. That will lead to what we call generating income, productive income, and all functioning of the society, and henceforth that would lead to poverty alleviation. So that I have given a brief snapshot of what exactly capability of approach of poverty alleviation means. This basic diagram which can be utilized when it comes to the capability approach of poverty alleviation. Apart from that, apart from noting down this what we call answering this question, I would like the viewers to think ahead, think what we call a step more apart from this capability approach, and think why this demographic at the time of reaping demographic dividend, this idea of providing good health, good education, actually good information, why it becomes so important. So one must be able to, if you think in this line, and you once you understand the capability approach, you'd actually understand that how reaping the demographic dividend quite have a similar approach when it comes to capability approach of poverty alleviation as well. With this question discussion, let's move to the next question, next chapter, and it is developmental issues. Next topic of society, Indian society, and it is developmental issues. See, development is a process. Development basically, includes a process in which we try to move we try to better the standard of living. Here again, I would like to talk about the finance ministry budget last year, which actually talked about ease of living. From ease of doing business, people are now moving towards ease of living. So developmental issues, if it remains the ease of living, is bound to be at a lower scale. So here I would like to talk about prominent developmental issues in short. The first developmental issue that I would like to talk about is sustainable growth. Sustainable development again is defined as a development or a growth in which the needs of the present generation is met without compromising the needs of the further generation as well. It is the definition which was provided by the Brundtland Commission, which was appointed by the United Nations organization. Here again, I would like to make a distinction between growth and development as well. Growth would primarily mean economic growth. Development is where growth as well as redistribution is taking place. Redistribution ensures that the lower strata of the people, the lower strata of the society, are also are similar stakeholder, are equitably placed so that the growth benefits passes down to them as well. So sustainable growth would be defined as a growth which which could be sustained for a longer period of time. It is actually providing benefits to the present generation without compromising the needs of the future generation as well. Here I have a request to the viewers that please try to learn more about sustainable development, especially the and cultural dimension when it comes to sustainable growth. Let's move to the next, and that is inclusive growth. Inclusive growth, basically it means that a growth which, as I said, is able to reach to the people. It is able to keep everyone as their stakeholder. The 12th 5-year plan, which was the last 5-year plan that the government of India came up with, had this keyword used: inclusive growth, faster, sustainable and inclusive growth. Inclusive growth, as I said, ensures that the benefits of the growth is passed down to every section. And in India, given the amount of inequality, inclusive growth would mean that greater benefits from the growth is passed down to the lower strata as well. Here I have a request to the viewers that let me know inclusive growth index. which organization come up with the inclusive growth index and how India is performing on such a index. The next challenge that so developmental issues that India is facing, it is a demographic dividend. Here I would like to talk about the demographic dividend and demographic eco. What basically this dividend says is that when there is a favorable demography, favorable age structure where the dependent population is reduced and the working age population increase, which in India is around 65% of the total population, what actually happens is that with the amount of investment increase, the amount of purchasing power increase, with which fuels the growth. So favorable demographic could be reaped as a dividend. However, there is an idea of demographic eco as well, demographic burden as well, in which when the government, when the nation is unable to reap the demographic dividend, it becomes a burden in which there is a greater number of unemployed youth, there is huge amount of unrest, the political system is more polarized and so on. So that actually leads to demographic burden and later on demographic eco, in which the window that was to be utilized, the nation is unable to utilize and it becomes an issue for it forever. The average per capita income becomes stagnant and drastically decreases when demographic dividend is not utilized. Let's move to the other developmental issue, and it is inflation control. Inflation, it is popularly known as average rise in prices. So inflation control is very much important because when it comes to inflation in an economy, if there is higher amount of inflation, the lower strata of people could not what we call their expenditure increases, as a result of which the basic necessity become more costly for them to afford. Here again I would like to talk about that the inflation is considered as a lubricant in economy. Certain amount of inflation is desirable, especially somewhere around 4 to 6% or 2 to 6%, which actually is the what we call the scale, the what we call the range which the monetary policy agreement between government of India and RBI and the monetary policy committee has been given the responsibility to keep the inflation in that range. It's actually required for the economy to grow. Certain degree of inflation ensure that the credit is available at a okay rates. There is huge demand as well. The demand will push the inflation. Demand will ensure that what we call there is what we call the economy is sustained, the production is high, and henceforth some amount of inflation is bound to act as a lubricant. But again, a very high amount of inflation corrodes the growth and it makes impossible for the lower strata of people to avail the basic necessity. Here again, I have a request to the users, to viewers, that let me know about the existing monetary policy committee and what are its mandate. Let's move to the next developmental issue which actually exists, is rapid urbanization. India as a country is moving toward rapid urbanization. Rapid urbanization actually becomes associated with multiple issues when it is unplanned. Here I would like to talk about the planning and development of New Mumbai, in which it took around 10 years for the very what we call planning to appear in the paper itself. Uh, During that time, what we call multiple unplanned urbanization took place, and henceforward uh, what we call sewerage, green spaces for the urban people, better health facilities, traffic and everything could not be well planned, and henceforward urbanization, which actually provide huge benefits to the people who are migrating, it become a bane for the very people who have migrated. They are unable, they face health issues, they are unable to travel from one place to another, and that is because of rapid urbanization that takes place during developmental period. So here the government has actually come up with policies such as smart city mission, and individual state as well has various mission to ensure that the developmental planning ensure what we call steady urbanization which is well planned, and henceforward the people who are going for what we call urban center get the maximum benefit out of it. Next developmental issues that India faces is land reforms. One must know that land reforms that were implemented, that were introduced after the independence, actually was a failure in multiple states. Some of the state has actually turned out good. However, in most of the northern state, it actually was a failure, due to which there is huge inequality when it comes to land holding. I must what we call mention the statistics of land holding, and that is 85% of land holdings are still small and marginal land holding. A small and marginal land holding means 2 hectare or less of land holding being what we call held by a person or family, due to which land reforms, failure of land reforms has led to low agriculture productivity as well. Industrial scale or manufacturing which require large agriculture farms to supply certain goods is not possible. Contract farming and everything, other what we call reforms that could be actually introduced in the latter stage were not possible, only because the initial stage of land reforms, such as limit on land selling, redistribution of land, was a total failure. Here I would like to talk about the closing of land reform department in state of Bihar, when the or when after acquisition of land, the department was unable to dispose of lands to the needy people who would be requiring and who has no land with them. So failure of land reforms, and yet again what we call implementation of further land reforms is a developmental issue. Here I would like to talk about the emerging technology which could be utilized to ensure that land reforms takes place very well. As I've talked about in the first class as well, the pro tip to tackle any social issues is to provide technological solution. Here I would like to talk about the state of Andhra Pradesh, where they are trying to utilize blockchain technology to provide land titles. Land titling is very much important here. I would request the viewers to go through what is land titling and how much importance does it play when it comes to land reforms. In India, what happens is the transaction is recorded whenever land, what we call land changes, ownership changes hand from one owner to other owner. Such is recorded. However, there is no clear titling which has been recorded or which actually exists with the government. So that actually hinders the implementation of land reforms and further reforms which actually is based on land as a resources. Here again, one more request to the viewers that please let me know what do you understand by the blockchain technology, and apart from titling, land titling, what other areas where land what we call blockchain technology could be utilized. The next challenges which occur is the center state dynamics. One should know, and one might be already knowing, that India is a federal form of government where independent governance structure exists at center and state as well. Here I would like to talk about the instance of the Bihar, which has which is considered a Bimar state. However, I must say that today it is performing really well. However, the center state dynamics at the time after independence actually resulted in lack of development in Bihar in the initial years. The center state dynamics, there needs to be a certain degree of cooperation when it comes to poverty alleviation or developmental program implementation in state. If there is discordant relation between center state, it is bound to what we call lead to failure of developmental programs. So as one knows that state a lot of time, especially during the initial finance commission's recommendation, were not able to generate sufficient amount of resources. More resources were provided by the center, and henceforward their developmental policies were tied by the center dictation many a times. So it was favorable when same party forms government at the center and state, so as to ensure that developmental policies are well implemented. However, that was not the case when it comes to For example, the state of Bihar, and we have seen how it has lagged in terms of development. Other developmental issues that we could actually talk about is alternative fuel. Alternative fuel is very much important because of the hue and cry when it comes to global warming as well as pollution. We have to ensure that the ecology is saved, the environment is saved, and for sustainable development it is very important that we bring alternative fuel. However, challenges remain when it comes to alternative fuel because of there is a what we call inertia in terms of adaptation. The cost is high, the related technologies are not well developed, and henceforward alternative fuel become a problem when it comes to adoption and its steady increase in the share of power electricity generation when it comes to India. We can always talk about other developmental issue as well, and I request the viewers that please write about other issues that you think is a hindrance to the development process in India. Let's move to the last section of this chapter of the developmental issue, and we would be as usual discussing a mains question to frame an idea on how to write a question when it comes to developmental issue as well. The question is, what is sustainable developmental goals? Comment on India's progress toward reaching the first 3 SDG. Here again I would like to give you a pro tip, and that is one must go through the 17 sustainable developmental goal and must have an idea that what each goal entails. That actually will help you a lot when it comes to what we call writing a main answer. That actually will, what we call, give you an understanding that will actually showcase that you are able to relate what you are studying with the developmental goals, the sustainable developmental goal which has been framed at a global scale. So as I said, you could start with the definition of SDG, and then for this very question you need to know what are the first 3 SDG. I must say that the first 3 SDG include Sustainable Developmental Goal 1, that is zero poverty, Sustainable Developmental Goal 2 is zero hunger, and Sustainable Developmental Goal 3 is good health and well-being. For more what we call better understanding of the first 3 goals, which are pretty much important, I would request to go through individual targets of these goals too. For example, no poverty will also have certain what we call subsections, certain sub goals which has been set for the entire nation, all set of nations to achieve at global scale. So on the first 3 SDG, if you are able to know that what are the first 3 SDG, you could actually comment on India's progress with respect to the first 3 SDG. One must know that the Sustainable Developmental Goal is aimed to be achieved by 2030. So this progress would actually help you evaluate the standing, the level of preparedness of India to reach the first 3 Sustainable Developmental Goal. At present of time, let's discuss the Sustainable Developmental Goal, that is first goal, that is no poverty. At this stage, still India, tends to have around 22% of poverty, 22% of existing poverty of the total population. So it is very important that poverty alleviation programs are given renowned edge so that we are able to sail across and able to achieve the goals by 2030. Other thing that you could actually put in what we call progress is that you could actually come up with figures showing statistics on how things are changing from 2015 to 2030. That is because initially before SDG we had this idea of millennium developmental goals as well, and you should be proud that India has been able to achieve the millennium developmental goals. So if you are able to come up with statistics, then you would be able to showcase how India has been doing on the first 3 SDG. One must note that Niti Aayog is the authority responsible, is the what we call body responsible to ensure that India reaches its sustainable developmental goals. With this, I would like to end the lecture. We would be meeting tomorrow with urbanization and its associated issues to discuss in the next lecture. Till then, Thank you and goodbye.